So Mark Johnston, you've got a pretty impressive string heading for Royal Ascot next week. We'll start with possibly the leading contender really in DXB. He's a gorgeous big horse. Saw him on the gallops this morning. He's a very relaxed type. How's he been since winning at Sandown?
Absolutely fine. Everything's gone perfectly. We had to look at whether to run at Sandown or not. He'd obviously qualified already for this £1 million bonus by winning one of the Henry by winning the Sagaro Stakes, and you could have argued that there was no need to go to the Henry II. Was definitely influenced by looking at what we consider to be the good old days of the 3 Gold Cups that we have won, and those horses ran, particularly Double Trigger, always ran in the Sagaro and the Henry II as preparation for the Gold Cup. And we concluded that if we didn't run in the Henry II, he's a big stuffy horse, and we'd have had to be doing some fairly serious work with him at home in the run up to the Gold Cup. So we opted to go there. He won the race, it's absolutely ideal preparation in my mind.
He looks like he's really relished that step up to 2 miles this season. Presumably you're pretty confident he'll see out the extra half mile at Ascot.
I am pretty confident he'll see out the extra half mile at Ascot. We've got to hope that he's even better over the extra half mile. Stradivarius, and it's not a 2-horse race by any means, but Stradivarius alone will take a lot of beating. Mm-hmm. I've got the utmost respect for a horse like that, but we are the kind of sort of slightly unexposed horse, unexposed at 2.5 miles, and the type of horse that I've said your dream Ascot Gold Cup horse, and that's right. I suppose you one that won the St Leger rather than finish 4th in it is even more of a dream perhaps to be taken to the Ascot Gold Cup. But we were thinking Ascot Gold Cup in the second half of last year, and the preparation, as I've said, as a 4-year-old has gone perfectly.
Good. And he seems quite versatile in terms of ground. It's a miserable day here as we talk, and it will probably stay raining for the rest of this week. You wouldn't be bothered if it came up a bit soft?
No, we wouldn't be bothered if it came up a bit soft. There was plenty talk last year suggesting that he needed the soft. My gut feeling was then, and I think the evidence now leans towards the fact that it was more the test of stamina he needed than the soft ground, and we've seen that when stepped up in trip that he can go on the fast ground as well.
And a horse I know you personally rate very, very highly, he's held in high regard within the yard, Elarqam. He was obviously back to form. I think he suffered a stress fracture last season, is that right? And then back to form at Goodwood.
Yes, he ran disappointingly at Salisbury at the end of last year. There was talk that he was displacing his soft palate coming in after the race, which many of them do. It's not an uncommon thing for them to do. So he had wind surgery, which I would say probably, in hindsight, wasn't necessary. But when he was being, let down and prepared for going off for surgery, John Martin, our senior vet, continued to look at him and investigate him, and he found the stress fracture on the pelvis, which is probably the most likely explanation for the disappointing run.
Okay, but obviously, presumably, you're very, very pleased with that comeback run at Goodwood.
Yeah, very, very pleased with that. Yes.
And it's probably a fair step up from a listed race at Goodwood to Royal Ascot. But would you rate his chances? He's Wolverton bound, I think, is he?
He's probably Wolverton bound.
And COMMUNIQUE, he beat Defoe at Newmarket this weekend. Defoe obviously reversed that form at Epsom recently, but Defoe's now very short in the betting for the Hardwick. COMMUNIQUE quite a decent price. Do you think that's fair? Sort of a reflection of their chances?
No, I haven't looked at the betting. I'm never influenced by the betting. But as you say, it's 1-1 this year, and I don't think you could sort of write it in stone that the Newmarket form was wrong.
Okay, and he usually likes to lead in his races. Any reason those tactics would change?
They're not tactics, as I have repeated countless times in the last 30 years, they are not tactics. Right. I have never in my life told a jockey to go out and try and lead. Okay. And I've had discussions with an owner about this morning with a different horse. I just think that is an impossible thing to say to a jockey, because you don't know how fast the others are going to be going. So we have never told anybody to try and lead on COMMUNIQUE or any other horse, and I won't be telling the jockey to do that at Ascot.
Right. So it's very much a case of you let the jockeys feel through the race.
It's very much a case of tell them to let the horse feel through the race. That the horse should be going at his own pace where he's comfortable, with no pushing and shoving to get a position and no brakes applied. And so I'm a huge believer in that. I see no point in pushing the head off, and I see no point in riding around with the brakes on. So there is no question of telling him that he's to lead on the horse.
Matterhorn, he did what no other horse could this season and beat Wissahickon on the all-weather, possibly a shock to a lot of people. He's subsequently been second twice. What can you tell us about him?
Wonderfully consistent, really, and reasons to think that some things that could have been different in those two defeats since. I certainly thought that you should never say you could have or should have won. I think you run a race again. For most races, despite what people would think, the result's usually the same. But we had legitimate reasons to think that he was unlucky at Chester. For always a small field, he was boxed in. The winner got first run on him, and we thought, had he not been boxed in, that he would have won the race. And next time, over a longer trip, we thought maybe back at a mile, he might just be that bit better.
Okay. And he's got entries for both Queen Anne and Wolferton. Do you know which way he would go?
I think he's most likely to go to the Queen Anne.
Right. Excellent. A very interesting horse, Dark Vision, who was obviously superb as a 2-year-old, hasn't really sort of converted that form. Is he sort of changed a lot from 2 into 3 as he's got older? And
No, not a lot. And his runs have not been bad at all. But obviously, he's going to have to find quite a bit to get back on the Group 1 trail. He's in the St James Palace, but at this stage I'd say he's an unlikely runner.
Okay.
The owner has other guns to fire in that race, and probably we're more of a reserve than a real candidate.
Okay, so what would be a target for him?
Well, he's got nothing else at Royal Ascot.
Right. We move on to the King Edward VII Stakes. You've got a few horses in there. You've got NAYEF Road, Sir Ron Priestley, Living Legend. Which of them might take the chance, and which of them do you fancy?
This is a very, very difficult question, and one of the delays in sitting down with you this morning has been trying to thrash out Royal Ascot entries with Charlie, and he was questioning the wisdom of me putting all of the horses, well, not Living Legend, but Sir Ron Priestley and NAYEF Road, along with 3 others, into the Queen's Vase. And I was explaining to him that I've won the Queen's Vase more than anybody else in recent years, albeit that it's a bit of a changed race, and it's, for as long as I can remember, it's been common practice for us to have the same horses entered in the King George V handicap, the King Edward VII and the Queen's Vase, which might seem a wide range in conditions, if not distance nowadays, but that's still going to be the case. And so we've got an extremely strong hand in the King George V handicap, as always, but we will keep our options open, and some of those horses could move to Queen's Vase.
Okay.
And or King Edward VII, sorry. Yeah.
Right. And which of those do you probably rate highest?
Well, the simple it's not always entirely down to which we rate highest. It can be down to which the handicapper rates highest as well, in placing them to their best advantage. And the two you just mentioned there, NAYEF Road and Sir Ron Priestley, I think there's £10 difference in the handicap in those two horses. So simply based on that, you'd say that at this stage, Sir Ron Priestley's, being the lower rated of the two by £10, is more likely to be in the King George V handicap, and perhaps NAYEF Road, you're talking here about King Edward VII, but I'd say NAYEF Road is more likely to be Queen's Vase, which is quite a jump up and trip, but a jump up and trip that I think he's crying out for.
Right. I'm probably going to throw you another tricky question now then. The Royal Hunt Cup, that's another race you've got a few entries in. Card Sharp, Masham Star, Vale of Kent. Which of those might line up?
Those that get in will line up.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. We move on now to Baghdad. He won at the Royal Meeting last year. He's going to Ascot again?
Yes, absolutely. That's been the target all along.
And what do you rate? How do you rate his chances?
Well, you can never be. It's very rare to have a banker at Royal Ascot. We were just talking about this in a couple of nights ago when Deirdre and I were at a dinner to discuss the Royal Ascot runners, and we were both trying to think whether Attraction was the only horse that we ever considered a sort of Royal Ascot banker. And certainly from memory, it's the only horse that on both occasions that she went there as a 2 and a 3-year-old, where I could say the pressure was really on because I'd have been disappointed with second. Right. That's not usually the case at Royal Ascot. It's a very rare situation to be in at Royal Ascot. So with a horse like Baghdad, he's a winner there last year, fractured his cannonbone in the race last year, and that's why he had such a lot of time afterwards. He's come back clearly as good as ever, and so he is one that we've set out that Royal Ascot was the target, but that doesn't make him a banker, not at that meeting. So for a start, we don't know what the opposition is at this stage, and as I'm forever telling particularly owners, the most important thing about any race is the opposition. That's
right. I suppose you can only beat what you're up against, can't you?
Yes.
So.
Or you can only be beaten by what you're up
against.
So it's impossible to, with any accuracy, rate a horse's chances before you actually know what you're running against.
We'll just touch on a few that you might have for the Coventry: MONOSKI, VISINARI, and Ifraz.
Yeah. We've seen the entries already for the Coventry. 37 entries in there. It's going to be the usual cavalry charge. VISINARI would be the horse that everybody would be looking at if he runs. And Charlie didn't want me to enter him because he said if you enter him you'll want to run him, which is obviously the case. He's top rated in the race. He's the one they would all have to beat. His performance first time out was it was very, very impressive. There's no getting away from it, and so he should really go to the Coventry. He's the horse that everybody's going to have to beat. MONOSKI is a beautiful horse as well, though. Really, really nice horse. He's got that one more race experience. Perhaps not as impressive, but could well be up to winning a Coventry. And you've mentioned Ifraz. It's not impossible that he'd come back to 5 furlongs and go to the Norfolk or the Windsor Castle, particularly if the ground is soft. And you haven't mentioned Machion, who I had to talk to the owner this morning and say, they're relatively new to ownership, and to say to them, you can go to Chester on Saturday with a favourites chance, or you can go to Royal Ascot with an outsiders chance. And they've opted to go to Royal Ascot, but I certainly wasn't going to talk them out of it. There's a horse that was a little bit unlucky, or not necessarily unlucky, but could have won at York first time, made no mistakes next time, albeit at Hamilton. So he's a twice raced horse that's been very impressive, albeit at a lower level on his first 2 starts, so deserves to be there.
There are no doubt plenty of horses we haven't mentioned. Obviously handicaps are races you do particularly well at the Royal Meeting. Who else should we be looking out for?
Oh, who else should we? You didn't mention Misty Grey amongst the 2-year-olds. No. We've entered him in the Windsor Castle, but he'll almost certainly go to the Norfolk. Summer Moon, we haven't mentioned Summer Moon, defeated last time, but there's no doubt whatsoever he's a good horse. He, again, once we see what the opposition are, he'll be entered in the Queen's Vase and in the King George V handicap. Once we see where his best chance lies, we'll decide where he's going. My gut feeling is his best chance will lie in the King George V handicap.
Okay.
And there'll be others, there's no doubt about that.
Who might be your best chance, do you think, of a Royal Ascot winner?
Yeah. No idea. Visionary, if we run him. Visionary, of course, if we run him, he's the best chance. He's the one that everybody else will be fearing.